Something that kept coming up from talking to people was that so many people struggled with just kind of the nebulous concept of where does my money go when I make purchases? And ultimately that's stemming from a deeper concern, which is like, I don't actually know if I'm cash flow positive, or I don't know if I exactly know what I'm making on a given unit that I manage. What I've found that kind of ties a lot of these people together is that there's not a lot of folks who get into the industry because they're, in love with the concept of doing bookkeeping. And so what people end up doing is kind of just hope that the problem doesn't go away, but you end up paying for the problem with more money, and you kind of just throw money at it. I initially had this concept in my head about like, what can I be using ChatGPT for? And now it's like, what should I not use it for? Like now it's almost inverting that.
Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome.
Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. Today, I'm very excited. I have a special guest. His name is Jonathan Sukhia. He is the CEO and founder of Topkey, and we are going to talk about how you can streamline your financial operations of your short-term rental company. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show. Not
Pumped to be here.
Set the expectations too high.
Yeah,
no
big
pressure,
shoes to fill. Lay down the gauntlet for future guests here.
That's right. Yeah, well, I'm excited to. I know a little bit about Topkey, but I'm hoping to learn a lot more. I would love to start with the origin story. So, what pain points, did you encounter, and like that you were trying to solve with Topkey?
So, yeah, in a nutshell, I mean, great to be here, Jasper. Excited to kind of chat with you. Topkey is really focused on really core mandate that we kind of think about as just to cut the time it takes for companies to close their books and to help them recoup expenses that otherwise get unbilled back to owners. So that's kind of the initial mission that we set up to launch. It's definitely evolved from that initial point to a much more broader product with more use cases. But really where we started, kind of there's the long and there's the short, and I can give you something in the middle maybe. But we were initially a company that I initially started Topkey out of Airbnb. So I was at Airbnb based in San Francisco, worked at a company called Hotel Tonight. It was acquired by Airbnb, ended up leading a team there that managed relationships with hotel groups as well as for vacation rental companies. And this is, circa 2018, 2019. And yeah, I'd kind of gotten the itch to start a company for a while. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about like problems and talking to people about like other areas that, they were building products for in San Francisco. And so hard not to get kind of excited to do that when you're in the Bay Area. And we started down the road to kind of explore opportunities. And ultimately, we initially left Airbnb, myself and co-founder, to start something that was a little different. It was a marketplace. And actually our kind of big idea at the time, since 2020, was to build a platform to help property managers find owners. So we ended up pivoting from that after we went through a Y Combinator, Startup Accelerator, and really went through a series of, kind of short tests, I would say. Like, we're pretty systematic about testing various problems, and something that kept coming up when we were going through that process. So I had, during COVID, moved down from San Francisco closer to where I'm from in Florida. And we ended up my wife and I bought a house in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, which is a beach town kind of 30 miles due east of Destin and about 30 miles west of Panama City Beach. So it's right in this big stretch called 30A in Florida, very heavy vacation rental market. And it's just a great place to be for kind of building the company initially because there's so many operators there. So I got to know a lot of the people there. I had a pretty great network from my work at Airbnb and still kind of was able to meet a lot of folks on the ground there, kind of understand more of their pain points. And just something that kept coming up from talking to people was that so many people struggled with just kind of the nebulous concept of, where does my money go when I make purchases, and how do I really get better at tracking ultimately my ROI on a business level? If you think about kind of where the challenge lies, kind of behind the challenge, people say, I don't know like how to track expenses. Maybe I'm losing money that I should be building back to an owner. Ultimately, that's stemming from a deeper concern, which is like, I don't actually know if I'm cash flow positive, or I don't don't exactly know what I'm making on a given unit that I manage. And so, that's just like the core concern. And anyone running a business knows that's like kind of an important question, because if like you don't know like where things are going, then you can't like understand whether you're a successful operator or not. And like that could be really bad if you ended up, getting yourself in a situation where you're underwater. So that was the core kind of pain point. We talked to so many people that similarly kind of echoed challenges around that. And then, we just had spent a lot of time seeing other companies that had kind of been dealing with this outside of the vacation rental space. And so had been using some of these more tech forward financial tools when we had started Topkey, and we felt they were very helpful. And so, but there wasn't really anything built for that in our industry. So that's kind of what started the journey. And we ended up starting to build Topkey from that core pain point. We now work with more than, I think, almost 200, maybe a little bit more than 200 vacation rental companies. We have a full suite of financial products that we offer to vacation operators, as well as like single family rental managers, moving more in that market as well. In fact, a lot of our customers today have single family rentals. So we've been working to kind of onboard those properties as well. And we've been growing. We have a team of almost 20 people headquartered here in Nashville, Tennessee, where we're based in person, and just a kind of an awesome journey. Very excited to kind of see where we're going as a business. Still a lot more to do, but yeah, that's kind of the initial starting point for where we found this company. So
hopping in here quickly to ask you if you are going to be at VRMA in Vegas in October. We are going to be there and we would love to see you. We have sponsored a booth 1118 on the expo floor. If you're doing over $1 million in revenue, we'll be offering free live on the spot turbo revenue audit. So we'll pop open your pricing tool, take a look at your pricing strategy, and let you know exactly where you might be leaving money on the table and how much more you could be making when you implement these changes. It takes less than 15 minutes. Jasper and one of our revenue managers are going to be right there at the booth doing these live at the event. We're also going to be teaching what Verma is calling a skills lab. Our skills lab is called Pricing Power, how the top 1% outperform the market. It's going to be a fun, interactive, hands-on workshop where we'll be pulling back the curtain of exactly what we've been learning about what moves the needle for revenue management in any size portfolio. That's going to be on Tuesday at 11:15 a.m. local time, and we cannot wait to see you in the room and teach you some of the things that we have been learning.
When you started a company, were you managing some of your own short-term rentals at the time?
So we owned a house in a beach town, but we didn't like short-term rent it because we lived in it. So no, my mom owned and had a short-term rental, but then, just having worked in the space for so long, and also prior to starting at Hotel Tonight, where I was in New York doing finance and ended up at Starwood. So I worked at Starwood for several years. We were acquired by Marriott, and I was on kind of the M&A, mergers and acquisitions team. So I had kind of like spent the formative years of my career in hospitality or hotels or vacation rentals. So that's the world I kind of came from, but that was really kind of the experience. And then like living in a city like 30 or a place like 30A, which is essentially, the entire community, the entire ecosystem entire business community is basically centered around that industry. So, it's kind of cool because you get to see everything ties into it, in a city like that, where so much of the revenue of the county and the city is tied to, tourism and specifically vacation rentals in that type of market where, hotels are less of the core focus. There's certainly a lot of hotels there too. But yeah, that was the background that I had going into it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big issue that a lot of operators have is that bookkeeping, expense tracking. We actually have a revenue management client out of Miami who has a lot of different buildings. And that's something that we've been helping our client with, is like actually trying to figure out which of these buildings are profitable, right? Because the revenue is easy, right? The revenue is easy to see, but then how do you allocate all the expenses? And if you have everything on the big pile, then you're kind of in the dark, right? Yeah, at the end of the year, like, okay, I made X amount of dollars, but like which of your units or buildings contributed to that profit or maybe even subtracted from that profit, you don't really know. So I think that's something that operators struggle with a lot. From your perspective, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes or biggest things that operators oversee when it comes to the financial operations?
Like the core thing we see that I think kind of resonates probably across the entire industry is that small or large, you end up constantly having to kind of like reinvest in that side of the business. So if you're growing and you have 5, 6, 7, 10 20 properties, that's like one kind of category of company. Small, you don't really have a ton of visibility, or you don't maybe not have a ton of transaction volume, but you still end up getting to a place very quickly where you're having to like basically do the books of 21. If you have 20 properties, you're doing 21 separate books. You're obviously doing the 20 properties and then you're doing your corporate operating company. And that's the companies that have very little complexity. A lot of people get into this industry, or companies get into it having kind of a separate business on the side, or maybe they have a real estate company, or maybe they have an interior design firm, or maybe they're a contractor. I mean, there's so many shades of the rainbow. So what I've found that kind of ties a lot of these people together is that there's not a lot of folks who get into the industry because they're, in love with the concept of doing bookkeeping or doing accounting, or basically in the zone of competence. They would probably not put themselves in the center of core expert in that function. And so what people end up doing is kind of going one of two routes, or maybe one of three routes. I guess one route is they just kind of ignore it and they kind of just hope that the problem doesn't go away. And sometimes that can work because people don't grow. And so that's like one way to do it. Another category is people just put money at it. And so they either kind of start to outsource, either internally finding someone to kind of be hired, or they just pay a fractional firm more and more money, always in kind of an easy solve. And there's a time and a place to absolutely outsource, and even larger orgs do this, but you end up paying for the problem with more money, and you kind of just throw money at it. And then the third solution is people go really deep on it and they spend a lot of time on it, and they try to invest in themselves, which is something that I recommend people do to a certain extent. But then there's a little bit of a, trade-off of how much time and effort can you devote to this without actually taking away from your core focus, which should be growing your operations, kind of hiring the best people you can, and then building out a world-class company. And it's really hard to do that and then also be kind of deep in the weeds every 3 weeks on, closing the books from the prior month. And that just becomes this constant pain. So, I just see people kind of getting into this, they don't want to spend money on operations or on financial operations stuff. So they end up wanting to take it, manage it themselves, or they are way more willing to just outsource. And then I'll often see kind of a derivative of the outsourced problem where someone will have someone on their team that they're just incredibly reliant upon to a fault. And this happens all the time with small businesses where you have someone who you can't live without. That person is either kind of you have a key man or key woman risk where you just can't work if they don't work. So then you end up kind of deferring to them. And it's a little the dog, what's that expression? The cart leading the horse
before the cart before the horse, or something like that.
Yeah. And I've seen it where people will be like, I can't make decisions on this because I don't know whether Cheryl, who's a fractional accountant that we work with, I can't she does things a certain way. And so we will often kind of see that as a challenge because sometimes people get pegged to that. And then when inevitably that person leaves, it's always mayhem. And so there's just a point at which you always really want to be mindful of where you rely on someone. And any business really should be thinking about that constantly. And, I think you should be kind of a bit paranoid if you're an operator and you have people on your team that are doing core things, and it's hey, the minute that person might for whatever reason not be available or whatnot, you end up getting into real pain points. So we see those things kind of often come up, tends to be consistent themes with kind of how people structure their org, and then that ultimately is downstream of what ends up happening to how they kind of think about running their books. I don't know if that all makes sense, but that's kind of what I've seen.
Just for me to understand, what's the best setup? You still, if you work with Topkey, you still need a bookkeeper as well? It's not a replacement of a bookkeeper, right?
No, it's not a replacement of a bookkeeper, but we certainly would say we supplement, and in many respects, we could help replace specific, I would say, larger groups that we work with. A lot of groups that have, 500 plus, 1,000 plus, 2,000 plus units. Absolutely, Topkey can replace, sometimes multiple people on the AP team or multiple people on the finance team. There's a lot of core functionality people are either just paying individual people to do that's not the most efficient, or not doing it at all. And so I would say for smaller operators, mid-sized operators, you're always going to want to have someone either in-house or external who you're working with, but you can definitely be strategic about how you use those resources and how you spend that money, and providing them with good structure is really critical to that. And that's probably why we end up partnering with a lot of bookkeeping firms and really have probably the best referral mode from those people sending us people, because they are, in many respects, some people I know will say you can't work with, we won't work with you unless you're working with a Topkey. So that's become a very interesting thing that I wouldn't have expected 4 years ago when we started the company. In Kind, we spend a lot of our time and energy thinking about how can we make the product better for the bookkeeper, because that's ultimately who we learn the most from, and who's also the one that's kind of using the most and has the most feedback in terms of what they really want. And that could be someone in-house or it could be someone external. It doesn't necessarily mean one or the other, but that's what typically we've seen.
We use a software called VR Platform. Is that something similar?
Something similar. It's a little different. Topkey is today kind of focused more on expense management, but we do have a handful of products that are probably overlapping there. So yeah, definitely a little bit of an overlap, but certainly have, I think, from what I know, have a lot of companies that will use that as well. So I can't speak to it fully, but I know that we do have products that are kind of overlapping as well.
So just to understand a little bit better, like what, I think for a lot of people, it's kind of hard to, really understand like what does a software tool actually do, right? And so I thought a good way to kind of visualize that is if you take let's say an operator, let's say 40 listings, very typical situation where you're still wearing a lot of the hats, right, as a founder, because you can't like hire in-house for all the different positions. And so if that person starts using Topkey, like how would it change their day-to-day, and how would it change their life essentially?
Start with like what they're probably currently doing. So probably today they have 2 or 3 different, if they're operating in a state or they're following trust accounting rules, they have at least 2 bank accounts. Many times they have more than that. They maybe are using, I would say, at least 2 credit cards, probably have one from their bank, probably have something that they use, to get extra rewards or points. Let's say they have maybe a Delta, Amex card, and then they have something from, some bank that they work with. They probably have cards that their employees are using. So they probably give, various cards out to their team. They probably have they probably have a PMS that they're using. Let's say they're on, Guesty or Hostaway. Let's say they're using QuickBooks Online. And then maybe if they're using a fair number of people of that size might be working with a third-party AP tool. So like call it Bill.com. They might be at a place where they're using like a Breezeway system or maybe something like SuiteOp for like maintenance. And then they are most likely, getting to a place where they have at least 1 or 2 employees. So they probably have, maybe 3 people, and then probably have a handful of cleaners that they outsource and work with. Does that seem like a typical group?
That sounds like a pretty typical operator. Yeah.
Yeah. So what that group is dealing with day to day, what I would say is they're typically seeing at 40 or so units, the monthly close process that was taking them maybe when they had 15 units, maybe, 2-3 days, is taking them closer to a week now. They're probably going through a process where they're not really quite sure every time they make purchases, where those purchases are being allocated, which properties, which categories. And then they're either working with and a lot of times at 40, they're probably still doing a lot of this themselves. So they're probably still going through the books themselves, reviewing every transaction. They're probably pulling down a credit card statement. They're probably looking at that statement every month and trying to kind of like manually reconcile every purchase. And then they're going back and they're flipping back and forth between their accounting software, their credit card reconciliation. So maybe they're in their Capital One transaction statement, or maybe they're in American Express, and maybe they're also looking in Zelle or Venmo, and they're trying to see where transactions are pulled from and looking at like whether those transactions have been appropriately categorized. And then they're going back into their PMS and they're looking at all those charges, and they're trying to kind of like manually code things in their owner charge. They use a PMS system. They're probably doing that on a monthly cadence. If they're a bit more structured, maybe they're doing it every week. They're probably spending a lot of their kind of energy from days 1 through 25 thinking about the business. And then at the end of the month, they're starting to kind of get the feeling that I got to start working on owner statements. And it becomes this like recurring pain point that they know they have to manage and they know they have to handle. And so generally when we come in and we start working with a company, what we do is we streamline a lot of that information and we put it into one system. So you have a core consolidated system, because we can work with any credit card. We built out direct integrations to Visa, to MasterCard, to Amex. So you get real-time transactions that you can see in one system. We will, whenever a purchase is made, whenever someone on the team is making a purchase on one of the cards that you've connected, we will then trigger a text message that gets sent directly to the cardholder. They can, in real time, code the transaction from point of purchase to either a property or to a category, like bill to corporate or bill to owner. They can, if we have an integration to like Breezeway, they can pull in their work orders and they can assign a transaction to a work order. And then we can effectively push it automatically back to the PMS. And so then they can go into Topkey and they can in real time see every purchase that they've made. Has it been billed back to an owner? Has it been billed back to a property? And then has it been synced back to the PMS? And then we have a ton of AI in our product that's then running through and categorizing things automatically for the accounting side. So, another piece of this, which is they're probably starting to pay some third-party bookkeeping firm to basically manually code a lot of this stuff. And it's important, if you run a business, you have general ledger, you have balance sheet and income statement of cash flows, and you need to like allocate things appropriately, whether it's a purchase that's being billed to the trust or not. And many times at 40 units, you're probably not even doing full on trust accounting. Maybe you're doing some quasi trust accounting. We can help you basically do that much more efficiently. And then we integrate everything. And so we can push everything back to QuickBooks. So that's kind of the core pain point that we would solve initially. The other piece of this, which is done as well, is we have a full accounts payable product. And so we can basically ingest invoices We have AI that'll read invoices. Any payments that are being made on behalf of a property can be billed back automatically. We can cut them via line item. And really, you can take any sort of like payment that you need to make to say it's a cleaning firm or a repair company, or maybe it's like a lawn care provider, and you can basically have all those bills automated. So again, where you would ultimately start to see friction is you're starting to pay more and more in time to some third-party firm to do a lot of this. We can handle that and then give you basically a much more buttoned up structure that then you can have a third-party provider handle. Because ultimately, like at 40 properties, you shouldn't be, overextended and having to spend an arm and a leg on third-party accounting. But many people end up having to do that because you're running 41 books. And so if you're running 41 books and you think it's core to your business, which it absolutely is, getting it wrong can be really bad. Getting it right is like kind of table stakes. And so that just becomes like where we can immediately step in. We have also a third-party bank that we work with. So Topkey, while we are not an FDIC bank, we have the ability for you to create an FDIC bank account through our partner bank. And effectively, today we pay out up to 3.1% APY. So for a lot of operators, they can use Topkey for their trust account or for their operating accounts and actually get yield, really further kind of like cementing the product and making it more valuable because everything's back and everything's reconciled. And you have this like structure that allows you to then, earn a little yield in a lot of places where banks might not be willing to pay you a yield. And so, that's kind of the core product. We've gotten a lot that we've been building out, a lot more newer things that I can speak to. But really, that tends to be where we see the most value for folks at 40 plus units. Just a lot more clarity around what was previously a pretty messy, fragmented system.
We recently, well, I think it was more than a year ago now, or maybe 2 years, but we switched to a new bank called Mercury. Have you heard of them?
Yep, we know Mercury really well. I've actually used Mercury personally and shared same investors, so we have a very similar, know them well. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to mention it because some of the things that you mentioning, it seems like when we went from an old school bank, I think we were at Chase or something, and we went to Mercury, I was like, wow, this is nice. Like, we can create as many virtual cards as we want. So now we have a virtual card for each of our vendors. So that really helps with expense tracking and financial controls. So I guess my question is, some of the things that you guys do, is that kind of covered by these newer bank startups, or is it pretty separate?
I mean, so I think there's definitely overlap for sure. A lot of these companies, for example, we have the same investors. So you can think of Topkey and Mercury as being like Topkey is similar to Mercury in some aspects. Obviously, Mercury doesn't have I think they might have some sort of expense tracking thing, but we're much more focused on the real estate sector. So we're by no means, I wouldn't say competitive to Mercury or anything like that. But in many respects, we have you'll have a similar experience in terms of like tech forward product, obviously much more kind of intertwined and integrated to your systems. So we are integrated to the property management software systems. We're integrated to Amex. We have integrations to Amazon to pull in purchases. I mean, what we've built is, you could think of similar modern experience on the tech side, but much more kind of ingrained in the workflows of a real estate company. Whereas Mercury is, I think it's a fantastic tool, fantastic bank that they just is much more broad, for anyone, any company could use it for, and it's just very tech forward. You can open an account easily. And, we have people that on Topkey that could use a third party bank. So it's not like required to use Topkey banking, but it's certainly like a piece of the product and the functionality. We hear it all the time when people start working with us. It's like, oh, wow, I can, send a same day ACH and it's free, real-time visuals into my banking infrastructure. It's much more seamless to work with a system like Topkey than working with some legacy bank. I've seen this, and we've invested a lot in that area because so many of the legacy banks just, they're not really designed with modern architecture. They're kind of built in the olden days, and those systems, they only do so much. It's like, it really is like, using a super dated tool, and a lot of that is just the architecture that those banks are built off of is like very legacy. So again, Topkey, legal disclaimer, we're a financial technology company. We're not a bank, but we do support and offer the ability for folks to create accounts. We have accounts that are FDIC insured up to 3 million via our sweep network that we work with folks on. So it's really modern support and helps operators in a lot of ways, I think, much better than like you would have if you're just banking with some random company in your local market or what have you. But again, it's just complementary to like the product. We can work with your existing bank if you want to bring those into. That's totally part of the product. So
I've got more questions. Where time always flies when doing these podcast interviews. But I've got one more question I want to ask you. But before I do that, can you explain a little bit more about who is Topkey for exactly? Like, is it for the individual hosts with a couple of properties, for the mid-size hosts, or for the larger operators?
The majority of people, the most value would be for like someone who's anywhere between, call it 10 to 1,000 properties. But I would say mid-size and larger is really where our core bread and butter is. But we spent a lot of time in the last year. So we really built Topkey for more enterprise groups, and that was intentional. We wanted to work with larger operators because we saw that they had a lot more insight and they were a little bit more buttoned up to help kind of initially guide where we're going with the product. I find a lot of value in getting feedback from people we're building software alongside. So that was kind of our initial focus. We've now opened the product up much more to smaller operators because, we're a lot more comfortable bringing those folks in. So, if you have 10, 15, 20 properties, absolutely relevant for you. As you start to scale, we see a ton of value in folks kind of starting to move more and more. And that's tends to be who we see. Hey, I've got 15 properties. I'm now growing and I need help with this versus whereas, if you had 5 or 6, it's probably less of a pain point for you. And, there are probably better ways to do that more efficiently just on your own at 4 or 5 properties. But yeah, that's the really core focus for us.
Gotcha. If people want more information or they're interested in working with you guys, like what's the best place to find you?
Just our website, topkey.io.
Awesome. So one more question that's less related to Topkey, but I thought it'd be fun to ask you is because there's, obviously there's so many different problems in the short-term rental space that you can solve. So I'm just curious, like if you weren't building Topkey, what other problem would you want to solve in the industry?
I honestly I don't have a great answer for you. I think a lot about this problem. So it's hard for me to like switch gears and see kind of what else is out there that people are dealing with. I mean, if I were to like, this is just me, very rough thought, but I think labor is a real pain point for our industry. And I would say just broadly, we tend to work with, even more than just short-term rental, just real estate companies, finding people to do the work that you need to do, service you need to provide to people who are effectively either your tenant or you're a guest. Anytime people are staying somewhere, sleeping at your properties, there's a level of expected service that you need to deliver. And it's a higher level than like even what someone might need at a fast food restaurant or a gas station or something. You need to like deliver good service. And it's quite hard given labor costs to find those people I've talked to so many people who've struggled with this. I was just at a conference a few months ago down in Savannah, and we were talking to some operators about, just like having cleaners coming in, doing kind of shoddy work, leaving, and then telling the owners like, hey, pound sand, I'm not coming back. You need me more than I need you. Having those kind of conversations is wild because, just what are you going to do? Like you got to have the house turned, but there's not enough folks in that market to support vacation rental companies in that regard. So it's just one example. I think 2 things. One, I think there's actually absolutely going to be more automation that will actually benefit operators. Now, things like cleaning, maintenance, that's hard to automate. I don't think we're going to see that stuff be taken away by AI. But I think there's a world where things that can be automated will be automated. Certainly we see more of it on the financial side. And then that will translate to savings that can be applied to like, investing more, and for the right operators to pushing more to like, hey, I would actually pay a cleaning firm more money to do better work and to give me guaranteed time when I need it, and that kind of thing. So I think there's more that could be done to help improve that, because I think recruiting in general is always hard, but especially for our industry, so many operators are in markets that are very like maybe higher cost of living, so you don't have necessarily your pick of the people or you don't have the options, right, to be able to support. I talk to people in Jackson Hole or where I used to live in 38. It's like, man, find a good hourly employee to come do what is often pretty tough work is not easy. And those people aren't like, there's just not that many of them in those markets. So, and it's seasonal too. Some of the work, it can also be seasonal. So yeah, I'd love to, if there are people building interesting products around that front, I'd be interested to chat with them and collaborate, because I think there's something there, but I mean, not what we're focused on, but that's an area that I find to be very right for improvement, at least.
Yeah, it's a good one. My wife bought about a week ago, she bought some type of robot that's now cleaning the house every day.
Yeah, interesting.
I wonder if if companies are starting using those devices, right?
Yeah, people. It's funny. I don't follow I follow the AI stuff very closely because we're building a lot of it. But the on the physical AI stuff, I feel like it's kind of like it's not there, and then it'll be there one day, and we're gonna be like, "Whoa, wait a minute, what is this?" It's like you go to San Francisco, and now I'm starting to see them in the coffee shops, like at the airport, where there's just like a machine making your macchiato or whatever, and it's like in a little I forget what they call them. They're like they're basically automated coffee baristas, and they're fully automated, and stuff like that. Like I saw some video on X the other day of someone cleaning like toilets, and this thing is like completely. It's doing the work of a human, and it's doing it well. And it's like, probably in 10 years, those things will be all over the place. You're gonna be,
I mean, it can go pretty fast, because I don't know about you, but I find myself talking to ChatGPT quite a lot these days. And you know how you can talk, you can talk through my phone, like even when I'm in the car or something, I want to know something, I start talking to ChatGPT, and like honestly, like you put that in something that looks like a human, and you basically have like a friend, like that you can talk to and
it's nuts.
Ask all these questions, and they get to know you, and they know things about you. It's very interesting, and these things can go really, really fast. It's fascinating.
I initially had this concept in my head about like, okay, what can I be using ChatGPT for? Use Claude 2 and I use X, but ChatGPT is kind of my go-to. And now it's like, what should I not use it for? Like now it's almost inverting that. It's like, hey, what would be like something I shouldn't use this for? It's crazy. Stupid little random aside note, but I was getting my tires rotated Saturday, and I went in and I was like, the guy quoted, you got tires that have, whatever, treads low. You need to get 2 new tires. And I just banged in the ChatGPT like, hey, here's the quote. Tell me what you think. And next thing you know, it's like, oh, Costco offers no installation on tires, but they have the same tire at the same price. And I just thought, I'm gonna go over to Costco. And I walked up to the front, the discount tire, I said, hey, here's my phone. Here's the price at Costco. There's no installation. Can I get the same tires? I'm happy to take the car to Costco. It's like, yeah, we'll match the price. It was like, great. And I was like, I would never have done that. I would have not spent 45 minutes trying to like search on Google. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so, but there's a million examples of just applications. It's kind of crazy. And it's awesome. I mean, it's really awesome. Like,
100%. Is 100%. I have I just literally I have this Garmin device for my bicycle. I do road biking, and I hadn't done it for a while, and I installed everything, and it connects to Strava and like all that stuff. And when I first installed these devices 4 years ago, I just looked up how to use them, and I installed it all, and it took a little bit of time to figure out, but I figured it out. Now I'm like, okay, go straight to ChatGPT, and I'm like, hey, I have this device. It's a Edge 1030. I have Strava. I have a bicycle. Like, how does stuff work? And it just explained it to me. It took me like 10 minutes to put together. But as I was doing that, I was wondering, like, I wonder if we become like, if we get to the point where we're so used to just having ChatGPT figure everything out for us that it kind of hurts our creative way of thinking. Maybe problem solving. So we'll see.
I'm starting to think there's probably like a bit of a bifurcation to where you need to, like, it is great for there's a cold start problem that humans have, which I certainly have, where I'm like, I don't know how to do this thing, and I need to figure out how to do this thing, and I end up having to think about cooking. I love cooking, but like, hey, what do I need to do to start making a new recipe? Or I'm gonna like, there's so many examples of where my sister bought, the other day, it was like, how do you return a DoorDash gift card? We were chatting, we accidentally bought a gift card. It's like, okay, well, I could like draft a note to the help at DoorDash and write something, and I would probably spend 20 minutes writing it up. You know what I mean? And it's like, now it's like, dictate, ChatGPT, write me a note, great, bang, send it, done. And so having this thing that you can just outsource, things that aren't necessarily additive to your like life, like, hey, I just need to get this done. That's really important, but then you really need to make sure you're not over reliant on it for things that are core to your life or core to your company. So for example, like, you need to be thinking about how do you build a business, or, you can use it to help you, but you definitely, if you're building tools in this realm, like, you don't want to just be like, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what I need to build. That's crazy. You can use it. But so then I think that's ultimately, I think we end up in a world where people are using this stuff a lot for just like the basic things that are very like not super constructive to your life, but you just have to deal with, I got to do this thing. It's coming up. I need to figure out how to do it more quickly so I can get back to doing other things. So I don't know. I'm curious if that's how people use it. I certainly use it way more than I ever could imagine I would use it even 6 months ago. So, and I'm finding myself, if I ever kind of getting stuck on something, I'm like, let me just throw this into GPT and see what I should be doing next. And that can be a great first start. Let me just get a little bit of bump here on this so I can get back to like doing something. Cause that's often where the challenge lies. It's like, I just don't know where to start. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see where we go in the next couple of years with it all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. We've been talking for about 40 minutes already, so I got to wrap up here. But I appreciate you jumping on. Good luck with Topkey, and hopefully we'll see you in, you're going to be at VRMA in Vegas?
I'll be there.
I think I already asked you that. You were there. Okay, cool. We'll be able to meet in person. And for all the listeners out there, if you are making it to VRMA, make sure you connect with Jonathan of Topkey, and make sure you find Freewyld Foundry as well. We'll have a little stand in the vendor area. We're going to do a workshop as well, 1.5 hour workshop. We got some cool stuff, free reports, and all sorts of goodies for you. So make sure you find us at VRMA if you're going. And if not, keep listening to this podcast. We'll be back on Friday. We'll see you next time.
Get paid for your pad. Get